This guy's trying to kill me.
Who? You need police, police, police! Get in the car, get in the car.
I'm lying to you.
What's wrong?
It's a chilling encounter caught on a dash cam.
A brazen car theft captured on camera.
Video shows the frightening moment a pregnant mother and her young son were forced from their car during rush hour traffic.
Here you see a motorist going down the highway.
I realized there were all these cars stopped when they shouldn't have been stopped. And I saw one car in particular with its four-ways on. Usually that means like there's a problem.
And as you notice right here, you see a man standing in the front of that car.
Do you need help?
I thought the gentleman was having a medical emergency.
We feel a lot of empathy when we think that someone is in distress. We become altruistic because we want someone to help us if we need help.
Do you need help? You need help?
Yes.
What's wrong?
Put me in the backseat. This guy's trying to kill me.
Who?
When the man told me that somebody was trying to kill him, for a split second, I kind of believed him because he looked so distraught.
Put me in the backseat.
Why, what's wrong?
This guy's trying to kill me.
And then I looked for the threat, but I didn't see any.
We don't know his mental state. However, sometimes people who are having a psychotic break, they may be paranoid that someone's out to get them. And they perceive real things in the environment as being threats.
This guy's trying to kill me.
Who?
I can't call him a traffic guy.
Who's trying to kill you? No. What's going on?
He attempts to open up Roxy's back door.
At this point, she does a great job of staying calm and locking her doors.
Wait, what's wrong?
I'm lying to you.
What's wrong?
She has to determine, is this a scam? Is this a carjacking? Or is this a person who is actually in danger?
I could see like how distraught he was on his face. So like, I really thought he needed medical attention.
Who's trying to kill you?
They are trying. See, look at.
Here, go in front of my car. Go in front of my car.
And that's when I realized this man needs help. So I'm gonna call 911.
Just wait, just sit down.
911. Please stay on the line.
He's not gonna kill you.
Your call will be answered by the next available 911 agent.
Roxanne does a great job in the situation. She inquires as to whether or not she can actually help before she jumps in and puts herself in harm's way.
Suddenly, another car pulls up.
Veuillez ne pas raccrocher.
I was concerned, but there were two young guys behind me and they were yelling to the red car, "Don't let him in, don't let him in."
Please stay on the line. Ottawa 911.
But this car is not locked, so the man gets inside and finds a pregnant woman and her 8-year-old son.
When he got into the passenger side, I was like, because his whole demeanor changed when he popped in. Like, he went from a vulnerable posture to like aggressive. So I just knew something bad was happening.
Now things get really scary. This guy's trying to kill me.
Who? Who's trying to kill you?
After claiming someone wants to murder him, the man forces his way into a car driven by a pregnant woman.
You need police.
He was like elbowing her into her stomach. She's 8-9 months pregnant.
In a panic, her young son jumps out of the car.
Get in the car. On Tremblay, there's a man assaulting somebody. He's trying to jack a car. Hey, get the out of the car.
After a few gut-wrenching moments,
He's stealing it right now.
the man forces the woman out of the car.
He bring you? Yeah, because I'm pregnant. You're pregnant. Yeah.
Paramedics arrive and rush her to the hospital. Thankfully, she and the baby are okay. Roxy uploads the footage to her Facebook page, and it immediately goes viral.
The next day, I was on the news.
Seen a lot of crimes happen in my life, unfortunately, but I've never seen that.
The dashcam footage of the harrowing ordeal is invaluable.
You could see his face really clear. And the cop loved that. He's like, we're gonna be able to submit a screenshot of this to our foot patrol officers and our cruisers, and they're gonna be able to ID him.
The next day, police discover the SUV ditched in a snowbank and arrest the man soon afterwards in a neighboring city. He's charged with possession of property obtained by crime and breaking and entering.
It's important to have a dash cam because it keeps everybody accountable. Video footage doesn't lie.
911, please stay on the line.
But while Roxanne needed the police, others go out of their way to avoid them. It's a wild chase that catches everyone by surprise.
This case begins when police officers are dispatched to a shoplifting.
I can't remember your name. Tell me again. Yes, Tasha.
The suspect, Tasha Sponsler, is accused of stealing cosmetics from a nearby store.
The 33-year-old is arrested, restrained, and placed in the back seat, while officers dig through her bag.
So as we're watching the body cam footage, law enforcement is going through her purse to see if they can locate the stolen goods.
It's a hot day, so in a routine move, they leave the car running.
Officers will leave the car idling because they want to leave the air conditioning on for whoever's inside the vehicle.
The officers are doing their paperwork. They're all standing around in the area.
But Tasha is up to something.
She's looking around. She's able to unclip the seatbelt while still handcuffed.
It appears that the officer did not secure the cuff tightly and did not secure the second lock on the cuff.
She's kind of pulling a Harry Houdini here. Once she realizes she's in the clear, she sees a window of opportunity. Literally.
She not only was able to get out of the handcuffs, but she was able to get through the cop car partition. It's only 12 inches wide. Who is Tasha? And what diet is she on?
Yeah, about that. Damn.
The situation is clearly escalated.
There are armed officers all around her, and that didn't stop her from stealing their car.
A dangerous high-speed chase is underway. And it's all caught on the stolen car's dash cam.
This chase lasts for 23 minutes, and almost half of it is at a speed in excess of 100 miles an hour. Anything can go wrong at any second.
In these pursuits, the public and innocent people are always at risk. Citizens do not know that this vehicle is being driven by a suspect. All they see is a patrol vehicle. The worst case scenario could be that this young lady could hit multiple pedestrians or kill herself.
What makes the situation even worse is during this chase, officers can see that the suspect is reaching for a shotgun that's locked inside the cruiser.
The shotguns that are mounted in patrol cars often takes only one button for it to be released.
As an officer, you have to be asking yourself, why is she doing all this? This was a simple shoplifting. Why has she escalated it to this point?
It looks like a video game type scenario because she's going off-road, she's going through spikes.
Eventually, officers realize that this suspect has no intention on stopping, so they have to use this highly, highly dangerous move.
officer angles his vehicle to touch the suspect vehicle and actually turn the vehicle sideways in order for the suspect to lose control of this vehicle.
It's absolute chaos at this moment. The car is spinning. There's debris going everywhere.
Within seconds, Tasha is surrounded.
You just had your cruiser stolen, and now you're being faced with someone who may have a weapon on them. So your heart's beating, your adrenaline's pumping.
Cover, cover. I got cover.
Tasha offers no explanation for her desperate getaway attempt. But there is one hint.
Yeah, true. What you got? Yep. All that for a little bit of dust.
She's hit with multiple charges, including aggravated assault, evading arrest, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Police post the video online, and it instantly goes viral.
Slipped out of her handcuffs and, when they weren't looking, climbed into the driver's seat.
So they did post a video of the police chase to their Facebook page with the hashtag #FoolMeOnce, making light of the situation, but also showing that they're humans, they make mistakes, and they fixed it. They installed a screw in the partition that now only allows the window to open 4 inches.
They screwed that partition a little bit tighter, so no one is gonna Tasha again.
At Tasha's sentencing, the judge slams her with 45 years behind bars.
An Angelina County jury has found the woman accused of stealing a Lufkin Police Patrol unit guilty on all charges.
The harsh punishment sparks controversy.
Now, 45 years may seem extreme, but she put lives at risk. And 45 years is not only to serve as a form of rehabilitation, but also a deterrent for anybody else who might think about doing this in the future.
But sometimes criminals are stopped in their tracks before they even get started.
A couple enjoying a night out at a restaurant ends up stopping a masked and armed man.
It's 10 p.m. on a Saturday night at this chicken restaurant in Kentucky.
The masked gunman walks straight to the counter.
He says something to the cashier. She doesn't respond immediately. So he pulls out a gun.
The cashier is terrified. But what neither she or the masked gunman realize is that he couldn't have picked a worse place to rob.
No one is in the restaurant except one couple. What is unique about this couple? They are both off-duty officers.
Nicole and Chase McCowan work for the Elizabethtown Police Department.
You can see that the couple notices what's happening.
The couple quietly hatch a plan.
And I saw her hands go up like this. I'm like, do you feel what I think he's doing? And he's like, yeah. He passed the phone to me and he said, call 911. And I looked at it for a second and I'm like, no. I'm gonna help my husband.
Literally no question. We just looked at each other. Is this what's going on? Let's go.
Two off-duty officers have interrupted their date night to chase an armed robber.
Chase goes one way, and then Nicole goes the other. This actually disorients the suspect for a second.
The masked gunman drops his gun, runs out the door, but they are right behind him.
At that exact moment, a shocked customer is trying to walk inside.
And as you can see at the top of the screen, you have another patron coming into the store, clearly confused, but he's nice enough to hold the door for the police officers.
Outside the restaurant, Chase and Nicole continue their hot pursuit of the suspect on foot.
30-year-old Justin Carter was arrested in minutes, and they hold him until other officers are able to arrive. He's charged with robbery, possession of a firearm, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
Security video of the couple's date night heroics hits the news.
2 off-duty officers being called heroes.
He was attempting to rob a restaurant. They actually chased him and later stopped him right there.
The public is enamored with this crime-fighting duo.
Generally, when we go away from home, it's to be away from the job. We don't have to worry about seeing people we know, and this is how it turned out this time.
Law enforcement is never off duty to the public, even when we are with our families.
And what are people most captivated by?
The officers were just married 6 months ago and had dinner at this same restaurant on their wedding night.
It's been an exciting 6 months.
Their date night may not have gone as planned, but the couple is honored for their bravery. And they get a gift certificate to a local steakhouse for another romantic night on the town.
This was absolutely an act of bravery. These officers saw someone who was in trouble, and they did what they were trained to do. What better bonding experience than to catch a criminal together? She's a keeper, Chase.
In this store in Canada, another criminal plummets to viral fame.
On first glance, this surveillance footage from this convenience store doesn't seem too outlandish, but upon further review, you see something weird going on at checkout.
They're trying to use a debit card, but the owner of the store believes it could be stolen. He calls the police.
The man and woman are answering some questions. And in this moment, you see a game time decision from the man. He's using the woman as like a battering ram.
The owner is trying to help the police to keep these suspects in the store. The male suspect eventually sort of wrestles himself away. He then tries to run to the back of the store to get out, but the door is locked. And now he's just sort of like caged mice inside of the store.
This is the moment that I'm kind of still scratching my head over. The man tries to arm himself with snacks.
He grabs like a bag of candy or chips, ready to toss it at the officer. The police officer pulls out a taser.
So he's now in a face-off with the police, and I don't think anybody would be surprised of which one of those is gonna win.
The man ditches the chips and appears to give up.
These situations are always stressful. Someone could be playing possum where they want you to get closer to them, so they may present themselves as being compliant, but until they're actually in handcuffs, you never really know. In this case, the officer was right to be hesitant.
It's never a good idea to lunge at a police officer who's pointing a taser directly at you. You would think that this is when the female suspect would just give up, but no.
She sneaks to the back like he tried to do, only to find out that it's also a locked door. So when you can't go out, you go up.
She's gone, but the officer is so busy trying to handcuff her partner in crime, he's oblivious.
The officer has the male suspect on the ground. He breaks away again, runs to the door.
The officer takes a tumble, but only to get back up, cutting off the guy before he exits from the front door and ramming him pretty hard. And if you're wondering right now, where has the woman been through all of this?
This is one of the most wild videos I have ever seen. Climbing through a ceiling, falling through a ceiling, throwing candy at an officer. I mean, all of this is completely ridiculous.
By this point, backup is arriving, and it's become this entire madhouse in the store. And thankfully, they are coming to escort this man and woman out.
Police identify the pair as Richard Pariseau and Brittany Burke. They are charged with a variety of crimes, including obstructing a peace officer and criminal mischief. A relieving end to a very unusual day.
The owner of the store actually got a certificate from the police for helping to detain them.
And he can now frame that in this store that hopefully doesn't get any other visitors like them again.
Put your hands on the vehicle now! What the?
This shocking viral video
You don't do that to a woman. Do you understand me?
got hundreds of thousands of views.
You know something's about to go wrong.
It unfolds just outside of Cleveland when Officer Stacy Wright stops a speeding car.
What goes through an officer's mind when they're approaching a vehicle? Being cautious and watching the person's hands.
You're going 57 and a 35, sir.
David Kubek is behind the wheel.
Why are you getting out of the car, sir?
And he's in no mood to cooperate.
The first mistake he made was getting out of his vehicle without permission.
This driver is clearly aggressive. This officer is on her guard. So both of them are in this state where their adrenaline is surging.
12 radio this male to step out of the vehicle.
Usually there should be a conversation between the officer and the driver to say, well, officer, my driver's license or my wallet is in another location of the car. In this case, it doesn't appear that they ever had that conversation and she became startled.
Officers are trained that if we can see your hands, you can't hurt us. The minute you start reaching in areas where we can't see your hands, our senses are heightened.
Step over here now. Have a seat on the ground. Have a seat. I'm not sitting. I'm not sitting!
He's not listening to her. We know that the human brain is wired to view right versus wrong in a certain way. And when we perceive an injustice being done to us, we can become very aggressive.
Have a seat on the ground. Have a seat. I'm not sitting. I'm not sitting! Back off! Back up! I'm not sitting! Physical.
Well, as an officer, you have to assume there's a reason he's non-compliant, and you have to assume it's the worst-case scenario, which is the fact that he might have a weapon in his possession.
Put your hands behind your back. I will tase you, sir. Touch the vehicle. Put your hands on the vehicle now!
She was asking him to put his hands on the vehicle so that she could pat him down.
That's when the tension finally boils over.
I have been in these situations just like this officer. I can tell you that the officer was thinking, I need to gain control. She cannot let him touch her, grab her in any manner.
Traffic slows to a crawl as bypassers spot the assault.
Radio, send me units.
Several people jump in to restrain Kubek.
Knock it off, man. Knock it off now.
People will join in when they see other people helping. It creates peer pressure to jump in and help as well.
But are they making things worse?
Even though the citizens are assisting the officer must think about her weapon. That many hands and that many people on the scene becomes complicated.
Even as backup arrives, Kubek continues to resist. As everyone piles on top of Kubek, Officer Wright tells him off.
You don't do that to a woman. Do you understand me? Pop or not, you don't do that to a woman.
She's trying to shame him for attacking her as a woman and contain his behavior with words because physical restraints were not working with him.
Kubek is arrested and charged with assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, speeding, and a seatbelt violation. His explanation to police? He was just having a bad day. But to Officer Wright's shock, she takes some heat for the incident in the court of public opinion.
Officer Wright was heavily criticized on social media. The officer does push the driver. People believe that she crossed the line. In our profession, she did not. Officer Wright did the right thing in this case.
She's well within her right to use hand force to try to gain compliance.
Touch the vehicle. Put your hands on the vehicle now!
She's instructing him verbally multiple times to put his hands on the vehicle. He's refusing to do so. He's taking a combative stance. And at that point, she's trying to use leverage by pushing him, getting him off balance so that she can get him onto the vehicle and get him into handcuffs.
On social media, Willoughby's chief of police thanks Wright and commends the brave citizens who stepped in to defuse the tense situation.
It's really rare these days for people to get involved. A lot of people are desensitized by seeing crime going viral on the internet, and they kind of tune out.
In the climate of America today, very few citizens actively assist law enforcement with an arrest. And law enforcement are still trying to bridge that gap.
But it's not unusual for citizens to become crucial witnesses. This shocking viral video unfolds on a Saturday afternoon at the shops at Legacy Mall on what seems like just another routine day.
Now I want you to pay attention to the top right corner.
It's something you hope you never have to see.
She may be suffering a concussion. She may not even know where she is. She may be so dazed that she can't even get up.
And just when you think you've seen enough, her attacker comes back.
If he leaves her on the scene, the risk is that she may identify him as the assailant.
But now, another man enters the scene. Who is he trying to help? The attacker or the victim?
When you see a traumatic incident like this and you witness this happening to someone else, you're traumatized. You may go into a state of shock. And in this case, it seems this person was frozen. He couldn't turn away.
Turns out this situation is far more disturbing.
Terrifying moments right outside of the shops at the Legacy in Plano.
You're watching the brutal violence associated with human trafficking play out in public.
The woman in the video is a 17-year-old victim of human trafficking.
Young women are vulnerable to this type of abuse. The person who traffics you will psychologically manipulate you into believing that they're the only person who will ever accept and care for you. It's really difficult for victims to break out of this cycle. That's why sex trafficking continues and the victims don't speak out.
And that's why what happens next is incredible. The bold move backfires. But this young woman refuses to give up. And with a small crowd now watching, the power dynamic switches.
He sees that there are people looking at him.
In his mind, now they can verify who he is and probably a description of his car.
Has she finally made her escape? As the shaken victim stumbles towards the crowd, someone dials 911, and police soon take her to safety. A few months later, her attacker, 29-year-old Ricky Stevenson, is arrested after tipsters point police to his Facebook page, where he openly calls himself a pimp and shows photos of the loyalty tattoos he forces victims to get.
Law enforcement loves social media because it is helpful in our investigations to strengthen the case against him.
And the explicit video caught on a nearby security camera also proves critical.
When you have in video, it is undisputable evidence in the case. It makes our job, also the district attorney's life, so much easier.
Stevenson is charged with aggravated kidnapping, but his victim is too traumatized to appear in court.
We know that it's incredibly difficult to prosecute these perpetrators of sex trafficking because a lot of times their victims don't want to report the crime.
Fortunately, many of the people who witnessed the attack do talk.
These citizens did what they should have done. Stand back, watch, and observe, and stay safe. We'd rather have good witnesses than heroes.
Ricky Stevenson is sentenced to 59 years for aggravated kidnapping. And it's a stark reminder about the pervasive epidemic of sex trafficking.
This video is a perfect example of what occurs right under our nose. Human trafficking is real in America. If you suspect any human trafficking activities, please report it to your local law enforcement agency. It could save a life.
If most bystanders become frozen, there's one man who makes it his mission to get involved.
I saw a big cloud of dust. My first instinct was to record.
By day, Corey Bainey works as a business consultant. But on his off time, he turns into a video warrior.
I think the world would be a lot better place if people took a more active role.
It can happen anywhere.
Well, this person's a really bad driver.
Here, he's heading to the movies with his girlfriend, Anna, when they notice the driver in front of them is behaving strangely.
Already wrecked once, clearly.
Where?
Their mirror's hanging on.
Okay.
The driver's side mirror is completely broken. And more importantly, the driver is driving erratically. It seems to be that this driver is impaired. He decides he's going to follow the car. He's filming the entire situation for law enforcement.
There's a cop right there.
Yep.
Although he's busy.
So as we were driving, I saw on the right-hand shoulder a police officer who had another car pulled over.
Corey flashes his lights and honks his horn to get the officer's attention.
She's coming. She's coming, I got him.
The officer attempts to pull the car over.
Does this person not realize that the cop wants them to pull over?
Correct.
Corey, this guy's letting you over, but you're in his way.
I am not going to pass. We all need to stay back until that thing's done.
Corey refuses to stop recording until the driver finally pulls over and he can see that the officer has things under control.
It's actually pretty rare that we have someone get this involved. If we're lucky enough, we'll have someone who's driving by the area make a call into 911 and notify us. But normally they don't stick with the vehicle and they definitely don't usually record it. But it turns out Corey's not a normal guy. He has a history of doing things like this.
2 years earlier, Corey witnesses a dramatic crash.
He pulls up, the truck is flipped on its side, and then he kicks into action. He immediately asks anyone if they called 911.
I came up to the rear window. They were trapped inside of the vehicle with the doors shut. So kick the window out and then help them to get out of the vehicle.
But this is where Corey may be taking things too far.
Corey's heart is in the right place, but now he's starting to do things where he could put himself at risk. The best thing you can do is wait for the firefighters or a paramedic to respond.
And this isn't even the most risky thing Corey has done.
Caught on camera the moment that a driver struck a man in the street and left him for dead.
Take a look at this horrifying hit and run.
You'll see someone come flying by on what appears to be a skateboard. What do you know? It's Corey.
Me and Anna were out and we were riding around town. I heard a very, very loud bang. And then I heard the screaming start, and it was blood-curdling. It was a daughter and a mother screaming because their father and husband had just been ran down on the sidewalk.
Corey immediately leaps into action.
It almost seems like Corey is born to chase down people trying to get away from crimes, because the split second this hit and run happens, he is going right towards the action.
As the driver left the scene, he was dropping a bunch of fluid, making it easy to track.
After a few blocks, the driver gets boxed in by other cars, but refuses to exit his vehicle. So Corey makes a bold move.
I picked up my one wheel, which weighs about 30 pounds, and just used it to break the driver's side window out of the vehicle.
With the help of another good Samaritan, Corey pulls the man from the car, and they subdue him until police arrive. He's identified as Jose Contreras and charged with leaving the scene of an accident and marijuana possession. He gets 5 years probation.
The truth of it is, I see myself as really just a citizen doing the right thing when the time comes.
I love Corey, I love his courage, but I would strongly advise everyone watching this to not do what Corey did. call law enforcement, keep a safe distance.
The man who was run over miraculously survives. And the story goes viral with millions of views.
At the end of the day, I do wish for more people like Corey, people who have the courage to stand up for what's right. And I will say, it looks like Corey might have a career in law enforcement. So Corey, if you're interested, reach out.
And if Corey isn't the person you expect to see chasing after criminals, then you won't believe this holy cow chase that made international news. It begins just after 2 a.m., 25 miles north of Orlando, where a hot pursuit is underway.
A suspected car thief who tried to make a run for it.
This all starts because this suspect stole a car, but we don't know why. Police are tracking this vehicle from a helicopter.
Things take a dramatic turn when the car swerves into a ditch and a passenger tries to escape into this dark field.
Signal 4, Sipes and Celery, bail out. Okay, driver's bailing, still got a passenger in the vehicle.
Why are the suspects running? What did they just do? What are they capable of?
There are 3 suspects in this car. The police and K-9 unit are able to apprehend the 2 people, but the 3rd takes off running like Forrest Gump.
Signal 4, Sipes and Celery, bail out.
This is a dangerous situation that could get a lot worse. Worst case scenario is that these suspects are armed, waiting to get the jump on law enforcement. They could injure or even kill any of the officers involved.
But police are about to get a very unexpected assist.
So this lady is hoofing it through the field, trying to escape the cops, but there is one problem.
If you see the large group of cows, they're literally following her and chasing her.
The officers in the tracking helicopter can't believe what they're seeing down below.
I was operating the camera on that flight, and my job during that flight was to relay all the information that I'm seeing on the camera to the ground units as it's transpiring live. This was definitely a first for me, and definitely had to hold my composure in between transmissions.
The police are implementing thermal imaging, basically using the body heat from the suspects to keep an eye on them. It's also showing the heat from the cows in the field, and there's a lot of them.
102 alert, I'm gonna give you my flashlight. You can tell me where to go from here.
Keep going southeast. She's pretty far into the field now.
Up in the air, our pilots had no way of knowing if the cows' intentions were friendly or not.
South and east of you, actually the large group of cows is following her. Looks like they may attack her.
I've noticed they were trying to circle her and surround her, so I wasn't sure if that was maybe an aggressive stance.
He has 2 really bad worst-case scenarios going on, getting arrested or getting trampled by cows. If I was her, I'd be more worried about the cows because you can't come back from that.
Or perhaps these vicious cows have other intentions?
You know, I don't know, cows could be a little bit hungry at night. They might want a midnight snack. And they're thinking, oh, if we find her, she'll have all the food for us. They're on her.
I thought it was hilarious. I almost fell out of the helicopter laughing. They followed her all the way across the field until she jumped over a fence and was able to lose them for a second.
That's when police arrest the fleeing woman and identify her as Jennifer Kaufman. Charges are filed against Kaufman and her fellow passenger, but later dropped. The driver is sentenced to 4 months for driving without a valid license and attempting to elude police. The cows, who seem perfectly relaxed by day, but apparently become dangerously territorial by night, are an instant hit.
These may be the most famous cows in the country.
The herd chased her down. At some points, they seem to be right on her tail. Pardon the pun.
Forget about police squad. This is a cow squad. 16 cows took off after the suspect.
Isn't that nuts? It's crazy.
Because it really does look like they're like, oh no.
Yeah.
Did she just? Okay.
Oh no, you didn't.
That's
Right?
exactly what it looks like.
All right.
Move over.
Social media had a field day with it, making so many puns. They thought that these cows deserved a commendation for their help.
The sheriff's office thanks the cow cops for helping them out. And jokes aside, experts say the bovine intervention likely saved the day.
This story may seem funny, but the reality is it's an extremely dangerous situation. The officers are chasing people. They don't know why they're running or what they're in possession of. I'm glad the cows were able to help in this one because instead of going in after the suspect had to come to them. Thanks, cows. Appreciate you.
The call comes in just before dawn, when the ocean is still black and the beach looks like an empty crime scene waiting to happen, the kind of hour when Florida feels less like a vacation postcard and more like a place where secrets wash ashore and refuse to leave. A jogger says he found something near the dunes, something that doesn't belong, something that made him stop running and start shaking, and when deputies arrive they see it immediately, the shape half buried in sand, the outline unmistakably human. One arm twisted at an angle that suggests the body didn't simply lie down and go to sleep, and even before anyone speaks the words out loud the air tightens with the understanding that this beach, usually loud with tourists and music and laughter, has just become the center of a murder investigation that will echo for decades. The tide had been high overnight, waves crawling farther up the shore than usual, erasing footprints, swallowing evidence, smoothing over whatever story the sand might have told if anyone had arrived sooner, and by the time the yellow tape goes up the body has already been stripped of context. Reduced to questions. She appears young, maybe mid-20s, barefoot, a thin layer of salt clinging to her skin, no purse, no phone, no ID, nothing that explains how she got here or why she never left. Detectives note the bruising along her wrists, the discoloration around her neck, details scribbled quickly into notebooks while patrol cars block off the road and curious onlookers gather, whispering, filming, posting, turning a dead woman into breaking news before she even has a name. Within hours the headlines hit local radio and television, a Florida beach murder, body found at sunrise, authorities searching for answers, and the community reacts the way it always does, with shock first, then fear, then speculation, because beaches are supposed to be safe, open, anonymous in a comforting way, and the idea that someone could be killed here, left under the stars while waves roll in and out, feels like a violation of an unspoken contract. Detectives canvass the area, knocking on doors of nearby rentals and condos, asking about parties, arguments, strangers, anything unusual, but most people say the same thing, that they heard the ocean, the wind, maybe music drifting from somewhere far away, nothing that sounded like a struggle. Nothing that sounded like murder. The medical examiner works quietly, methodically, determining time of death somewhere between midnight and early morning, cause consistent with homicide, evidence of restraint, evidence of force, but little else that points cleanly in one direction. No defensive wounds under the fingernails, no clear weapon recovered, no obvious trail leading away from the dunes, just the beach doing what beaches do best, hiding everything in plain sight. Fingerprints are taken, photographs snapped from every angle, the body zipped into a bag and transported away while the sun rises fully now, illuminating the scene with an almost cruel normalcy, families setting up umbrellas just beyond the tape. Children asking questions their parents don't know how to answer. Days pass and the victim finally gets her name, released cautiously to the public after next of kin notifications are made, a young woman who recently arrived in Florida, drawn by seasonal work and warm weather, someone who had called her family only a week earlier, saying she loved the beach. Saying she felt free, saying things were finally going to get better. Her last confirmed sighting places her at a small bar not far from the shoreline, security footage grainy but usable, showing her laughing with people investigators can't quite identify, faces blurred by distance and bad lighting. Time stamps that suddenly matter more than anyone in that room could have known at the time. Detectives pull the footage frame by frame, looking for tattoos, logos on shirts, anything that might stand out, but the bar was crowded that night, packed with tourists and locals escaping the heat, and everyone looks like everyone else, everyone forgettable until they aren't. Interviews begin, bartenders, servers, patrons who remember fragments, a raised voice, a spilled drink, a man who wouldn't stop talking, a woman who left alone, or maybe she didn't, stories conflict, timelines bend, and the case starts to feel slippery, like trying to hold water in your hands. As weeks turn into months, the investigation widens, phone records examined, bank activity traced, posters circulated, tips pouring in from people who think they saw something, heard something, dreamed something, but nothing solid sticks. Each lead seems promising for a moment, then collapses under scrutiny, alibis check out, DNA doesn't match, witnesses recant or disappear, and slowly the urgency fades, replaced by routine, by other cases, other bodies, other calls that come in just before dawn. The file grows thicker, heavier, and then one day it stops growing at all. The murder becomes a cold case, officially labeled, unofficially feared, the kind of unsolved crime that lingers in the background of a town's identity, resurfacing every time someone walks the beach alone at night or hears sirens in the distance. Her family keeps asking questions, keeps calling detectives who have fewer and fewer answers, keeps lighting candles on anniversaries while the ocean continues to do what it has always done, washing the shore clean, pretending nothing happened. Years pass. New detectives inherit the case, read through old reports, stare at the same photos, circle the same unanswered questions, and feel the same frustration, the same sense that something important was missed, something small and cruel and obvious in hindsight. Technology advances, databases expand, evidence gets retested, but still the case refuses to give up its secrets, and the beach remains just a beach, indifferent, sunlit, crowded, hiding the memory of a woman who died there and a killer who walked away. Then, long after most people have stopped paying attention, long after the headlines have faded and the name has become just another entry in an old file, the phone rings again, this time not at dawn, not from a jogger or a patrol unit, but from an anonymous caller who doesn't give a name. Doesn't give a reason, only a detail so specific, so unsettling, that the detective on the other end of the line feels the room change, feels the past lean forward, feels a cold case stir in its sleep, because some secrets, no matter how long they stay buried, eventually find a way back to the surface. The anonymous tip doesn't arrive with drama or a flourish, it comes flat and steady, a voice stripped of emotion, offering a single thread pulled tight across the years, a name investigators recognize instantly not because it ever stood out, but because it never did. A name buried deep in old interview notes, marked once as low priority, cleared early, forgotten quickly, and yet the caller knows things no stranger should know, details never released to the public, details only someone close to that night could carry. And when the line goes dead the detective sits there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the office lights, feeling the weight of time collapse inward. The case file comes off the shelf again, dust shaken loose as pages are spread across the table, photographs resurfacing like ghosts, the beach at sunrise, the body near the dunes, the bar footage paused on blurred faces, and there it is, the name from the call. Attached to a brief paragraph written years earlier, interviewed once, cooperative, calm, claimed to have left the area before midnight, no witnesses contradicting him, no evidence tying him directly to the victim, just another background character in a crowded scene. At the time it made sense to move on, to follow louder leads, messier suspects, but now that decision feels brittle, fragile, like it could snap under the slightest pressure. Investigators retrace the timeline, minute by minute, reconstructing the night with fresh eyes, mapping movements that once seemed insignificant, realizing how much had been assumed instead of proven. The victim's phone records show a brief signal near the beach hours after she was last seen at the bar, something written off years ago as a glitch or delayed ping, but now it's circled in red, highlighted, questioned. Credit card data places her nowhere after midnight, no rideshare, no purchases, nothing that explains how she traveled the short distance to the shore, unless someone else drove her, someone who never left a digital footprint. They find the interview transcript again, the suspect's words measured, polite, rehearsed even, saying he didn't know her well, saying he saw her briefly, saying he went home early, and suddenly those statements feel too smooth, too clean, as if he knew exactly what not to say. Back then, his alibi rested on a roommate who claimed they watched television together, a statement never challenged because there was no reason to push, no pressure, no sense that this was the hinge on which the entire case might turn. The detectives go back to that address, years later, knocking on a door that opens to a stranger, the old roommate long gone, records showing he moved out of state not long after the murder, contact information outdated, trail cold. They track him down anyway, through employment records, social media fragments, a life rebuilt far from the beach, and when they finally sit across from him in a quiet interview room, his memory falters, details blur, timelines shift, and eventually he admits what he never said before. That he didn't actually see his roommate come home that night, that he assumed he did, that it was easier to agree, easier not to complicate things. That single admission cracks something open. Investigators request a new warrant, pull old evidence from storage, items once tested with limited technology now examined again with methods that didn't exist at the time, and while results take weeks, the waiting feels electric. Charged with the sense that the case is finally moving after years of stillness. Meanwhile, they dig into the suspect's past, uncovering patterns that once hid in plain sight, reports of volatile behavior, restraining orders that never escalated into arrests, a trail of broken relationships and sudden departures that paint a picture far different from the quiet, cooperative man described in the original file. They rewatch the bar footage again, slower this time, frame by frame, enhancing what they can, and there, just before the victim leaves the frame, is a moment no one lingered on before, the suspect leaning in close, his hand brushing her arm. Her body language stiffening for just a second before the crowd swallows them both. It's subtle, easy to miss, but now it feels loud, like a scream trapped inside a single pixelated gesture. Witnesses are re-interviewed, some surprised to be contacted after so many years, others reluctant, guarded, but time has a way of loosening tongues, and one former bartender remembers something she never thought mattered, a man arguing quietly with the victim outside, voices low, faces close. The kind of confrontation that doesn't draw attention unless you're looking for it. She didn't report it back then because it didn't seem violent, didn't seem urgent, and because no one asked her the right question. As the investigation tightens, word begins to spread quietly through the department, a cold case warming up, momentum building, but nothing is made public yet. The detectives know better than to alert a suspect too soon, know how quickly someone can disappear when they sense the ground shifting beneath them. They build the case carefully, patiently, stacking facts instead of theories, waiting for confirmation from the lab, waiting for the past to finally cooperate. When the results come back, they don't scream certainty, but they whisper possibility, trace evidence consistent with contact, not definitive on its own, but powerful when paired with everything else, the timeline cracks, the false alibi, the anonymous tip that started it all. It's enough to move forward, enough to justify a knock on the door, enough to reopen wounds the town thought had scarred over. The suspect is located in a different county now, older, heavier, life rearranged, but when detectives sit across from him again, something is different, the calm thinner, the answers shorter, irritation flashing beneath the surface when questions circle back to the beach, to the bar. To the victim's name. He denies everything, of course, sticks close to his original story, but the confidence is gone, replaced by a defensiveness that wasn't there before, and when they mention the roommate's revised statement, his jaw tightens just enough to notice. Outside the interview room, investigators exchange looks, the unspoken acknowledgement that they're closer than they've ever been, and yet the case still resists closure, still refuses to lay itself neatly on the table. There are gaps that can't be filled, moments lost forever to the tide, and the anonymous caller hasn't reached out again, leaving behind only the echo of that first conversation and the question of why now, why after all these years. As the sun sets on the beach once more, waves rolling in with the same indifferent rhythm, the detectives stand at the edge of the water, looking out at the place where it all began, knowing that the truth is somewhere between the sand and the sea, between what was seen and what was ignored. And that even as the cold case cracks open, whatever lies inside may still be sharp enough to cut everyone who touches it. The pressure builds quietly, not with sirens or headlines but with paperwork, late nights, coffee gone cold on desks while detectives chase the feeling that the case is finally breathing again, that the past is no longer sealed shut. They don't announce the reopening, don't use the words cold case cracked, because they know how fragile momentum can be, how easily it can collapse if pushed too hard, too fast. Instead, they move in shadows, requesting records, filing motions, pulling threads that stretch back years, careful not to snap them. The suspect's phone data from that night is re-examined, not just call logs but cell tower connections, pings once dismissed as noise now scrutinized for meaning. His phone goes dark for a window of time that aligns too closely with the estimated time of death, a gap he once explained away as poor reception, a dead battery, something trivial, something no one challenged because there was nothing to challenge it with. Now that gap feels deliberate, like a door quietly closing in the dark. Detectives map the geography again, walking the route from the bar to the beach, measuring distances, timing the drive, imagining the car slowing near the dunes, headlights cutting briefly across sand before disappearing. They realize how easy it would have been, how invisible, how the night itself could have been an accomplice. Florida doesn't sleep, but it looks the other way more often than people like to admit. They dig into the anonymous tip again, replaying the recording, isolating the voice, searching for accents, age, gender, anything that might hint at who decided to speak after all this time. Analysts suggest the caller wasn't nervous, wasn't rushed, sounded like someone who had rehearsed the words, someone who wanted to control the narrative without being part of it. The information given was precise, surgical, not a confession, not an accusation, but a nudge in exactly the right direction, as if the caller knew investigators would do the rest. Theories emerge quietly among the team, never written down, never spoken in full sentences, just looks exchanged when certain facts line up too neatly to ignore. Was the caller someone close to the suspect, a former partner, a friend who carried guilt like a stone in their chest, or was it the suspect himself, trying to test the waters, trying to see how much police really knew? In unsolved cases, motives don't belong only to killers, they belong to everyone who survived the night and learned to live with it. They bring the victim's family back into the conversation, carefully, gently, explaining that new information has surfaced without promising justice they can't yet deliver. The family listens, hope flickering and retreating all at once, because they've been here before, stood at this edge before, watched leads dissolve into nothing. Still, they answer questions again, revisit memories, hand over old photos, old letters, anything that might help paint a fuller picture of who she was in those final days, who she trusted, who she feared. One photograph stops the detectives cold. It shows the victim on the beach weeks before her death, standing beside a man whose face is half turned away from the camera, but whose posture, whose clothing, matches someone they've seen before, someone already circled in the file. The family doesn't remember his name, doesn't remember much about him at all, just that he seemed charming at first, attentive, the kind of person who appears suddenly and inserts himself quickly into someone's life. That photograph changes the texture of the case. It suggests familiarity, access, a relationship deeper than a brief encounter at a bar, and it reframes the night of the murder as something less random, less opportunistic. This wasn't just a wrong place, wrong time scenario, it may have been an ending to something that had been quietly unraveling for weeks. Detectives confront the suspect again, this time armed with more than questions. They slide the photograph across the table, watch his reaction carefully, the flicker in his eyes before he schools his expression back into indifference. He admits knowing her better than he initially claimed, admits they spent time together, but insists it ended amicably, insists he had no reason to hurt her, insists that whatever happened on that beach had nothing to do with him. His voice rises just slightly as he speaks, frustration bleeding through, the performance straining under its own weight. They let him talk, let him fill the silence, because silence has a way of making people reveal more than they intend. He contradicts himself without realizing it, shifting details, altering timelines, small inconsistencies that stack up slowly, dangerously. Nothing explosive, nothing that would make headlines, but enough to make the room feel smaller, enough to make the detectives feel like they're standing in the right place at last. Outside, the world remains indifferent. Tourists still crowd the beach, children still dig holes in the sand near where a body was once found, unaware, untouched by the history beneath their feet. The case doesn't exist for them, not anymore, and that disconnect fuels the investigators, reminds them why unresolved murders matter long after the news cycle moves on. The lab calls again with additional findings, subtle but significant, fibers that don't belong to the beach environment, consistent with a vehicle interior, consistent with a car the suspect once owned but sold shortly after the murder. The car is long gone now, records showing it passed through multiple hands, eventually scrapped, another piece of potential evidence erased by time, but the timing gnaws at the detectives, the way some decisions only make sense when viewed backward. They prepare an arrest affidavit, then hesitate, knowing how thin the line is between enough and not enough, between suspicion and proof. Prosecutors push back, ask for more, ask for something that ties it all together, something juries can't explain away as coincidence or hindsight. Cold cases demand more than intuition, more than pattern recognition, they demand clarity in a fog built over years. And then, just as the investigation seems to stall again, the anonymous caller reaches out a second time. This time, the message is shorter, sharper, almost impatient, referencing an object, a place, a detail investigators haven't publicly acknowledged, something that sends them scrambling back through old evidence logs with a sudden, breathless urgency. The caller hangs up before questions can be asked, leaving behind a sense that someone is watching the case unfold, reacting to it, adjusting in real time. The detectives realize they are no longer alone in this pursuit. Someone out there knows the truth, or at least a version of it, and is deciding, piece by piece, how much to reveal. It's a dangerous dance, one that forces investigators to move faster, to anticipate the next move, to consider the possibility that the final key to the case may come not from evidence, but from a conscience cracking under the weight of years. As night falls again over the Florida coastline, waves rolling in with their familiar hiss, the case teeters on the edge between resolution and collapse, and the detectives know that whatever happens next will either finally bring the truth into the light, or bury it forever beneath the sound of the sea. The object mentioned in the second anonymous call sits quietly in the evidence log, a line of text most people skimmed past for years, catalogued, bagged, and forgotten, because at the time it didn't scream relevance, didn't glitter like a weapon or bleed like a confession. It was described simply, almost dismissively, recovered near the dunes but not close enough to the body to be considered definitive, an item that could belong to anyone who had walked that stretch of beach, and yet now, with the caller's words echoing in their heads, detectives see it differently. Like a sentence reread after learning the ending. They pull the box from storage, crack the seal, and there it is, smaller than memory, more ordinary than expectation, but heavy with implication. The sand still clings to its creases, grains trapped in places that fingers rarely reach, and suddenly the beach is back in the room with them, the wind, the darkness, the way evidence doesn't announce itself, it waits. The caller mentioned a specific detail, a mark, a defect, something that only someone who had handled the object would know, and when investigators find it exactly where described, the room goes quiet. This changes the math. The odds of a random tipster knowing that detail are microscopic, and the detectives feel the shift in gravity, the case tipping from possibility towards something firmer, something dangerous. They re-examine photographs from the original scene, enhance angles that were never enhanced before, and there, half hidden in shadow, is the object, visible but ignored, its significance lost in the chaos of that first morning when everyone was racing against the tide. They revisit the suspect's statements again, line by line, and notice what he never mentioned, what he carefully avoided describing. He talked about the bar, the drinks, the noise, but never the walk outside, never the stretch of sand, never the moments between leaving and arriving home. Silence can be as revealing as speech, especially when it lines up with something tangible, something you can hold in your hands. Detectives arrange another interview, this time with a different energy, less exploratory, more deliberate. The suspect senses it immediately, the way the questions are asked, the way pauses are allowed to stretch, the way the object is placed on the table without explanation. He stares at it a fraction of a second too long before looking away, a reflex that might seem meaningless to anyone else, but to trained eyes it lands like a flare. They don't accuse him. Not yet. They ask him to talk about the beach again, about whether he's ever been there at night, about what it feels like to walk near the dunes when no one else is around. His answers are vague, evasive, and when they finally ask if he recognizes the object, he shakes his head too quickly, dismisses it as nothing, as trash, as something anyone could have dropped. His voice tightens when they press him on how something like that might end up near a murder scene, and the room fills with the sound of his breathing, louder now, harder to control. Outside the interview room, detectives compare notes, the pieces stacking higher, heavier. They can feel the story taking shape, not as a clean narrative but as a pattern of behavior, opportunity, and concealment. They begin to understand the anonymous caller's role not as a savior or a villain, but as a pressure point, someone applying force in just the right places to make the truth surface without ever fully exposing themselves. The investigation expands outward, touching people once considered irrelevant. Former partners of the suspect are contacted, cautiously at first, then with growing intensity as stories begin to echo one another, accounts of possessiveness, of charm curdling into control, of arguments that ended with slammed doors and silent phones. None of it proves murder, but it paints a psychological backdrop that makes the unthinkable easier to imagine. One former acquaintance hesitates before speaking, then finally admits that years ago, shortly after the murder, the suspect said something strange, something that stuck with her because it felt wrong even then. He talked about the beach as if he had been there recently, described the sand, the smell, details that hadn't yet been shared publicly. At the time she assumed it was coincidence, gossip picked up from the news, but now, revisited through the lens of everything else, it feels like a confession that didn't know it was one. Detectives traced the suspect's movements in the days following the murder, noticing patterns that once looked like grief or shock but now resemble damage control. Phone calls made and deleted, items discarded, routines altered. He sold his car, changed jobs, distanced himself from the area, not dramatically, not in a way that would draw attention, but gradually, methodically, like someone closing doors behind them while insisting nothing happened. The anonymous caller remains silent again, having delivered their latest payload and stepped back into the dark, but their presence lingers, shaping every decision. Investigators debate whether to appeal publicly for more information, whether to use the media to flush out the caller or to keep everything contained, knowing that exposure could scare them off forever. It's a calculated risk, one that could either crack the case wide open or slam it shut. As the legal framework tightens, prosecutors push for one last piece, something that links the suspect undeniably to the scene at the critical moment. The detectives return to the beach, walking it again at night, retracing steps in the same low light, the same shifting sand, trying to see what the killer saw, trying to understand how someone could stand here, listening to the waves, knowing what they had just done. It's not reenactment, it's immersion, an attempt to bridge the gap between evidence and intent. Standing near the dunes, one detective notices how sound behaves differently here, how voices carry or disappear depending on the wind, how a struggle could unfold without anyone nearby hearing a thing. The realization settles heavily, answering a question that haunted the case for years: why no one reported screams, why the night remained silent. The beach didn't witness the crime, it absorbed it. Back at the station, the team gathers, exhaustion etched into their faces, but there's a current running beneath it now, a sense that the case is no longer drifting. The object from the dunes sits sealed once more, no longer forgotten, no longer neutral, transformed into a symbol of how close the truth can be without being seen. They know the suspect feels the net tightening, know he's likely watching, waiting, calculating his next move. And somewhere beyond the reach of warrants and interviews, the anonymous caller listens too, measuring time not in years anymore, but in moments, aware that the space between silence and revelation is shrinking, and that soon. The beach that kept its secret for so long may finally be forced to give it up. The decision to move forward doesn't come with celebration, it arrives like a storm warning, quiet but urgent, a collective understanding that there may not be another chance to do this right. Detectives and prosecutors sit in the same room, files spread across the table, timelines overlapping, photographs layered with notes, and the question hanging between them isn't whether they believe they know what happened, but whether they can prove it to 12 strangers who will never feel the weight of this beach the way they do. They draft the warrant carefully, every word measured, every claim backed by something tangible, because cold cases don't forgive mistakes. The anonymous tips are referenced without revealing their source, the physical object from the dunes described in clinical language, stripped of emotion, even though everyone in the room knows how charged it has become. The judge reads the request slowly, asks pointed questions, and when the approval finally comes, there's no cheer, just a shared exhale, the kind that carries years of restraint with it. The suspect is taken into custody on a quiet afternoon, not at home, not at work, but in transit, intercepted before routine can shield him. The arrest isn't dramatic, no resistance, no outburst, just a moment of confusion that hardens quickly into anger when the cuffs close around his wrists. Bystanders film from a distance, unaware that they're watching the end of a story that began before some of them were even old enough to remember. At the station, the atmosphere shifts. The suspect's confidence, already eroded, fractures under the reality of detention. He asks for details, for reasons, for explanations, and receives only the standard responses, the practiced neutrality of people who have learned not to reveal their hand too early. When he finally asks if this is about the beach, the room stills, the question landing heavier than he intended. The interrogation unfolds slowly, methodically, not as an attack but as an excavation. Detectives revisit the night again, guiding him through his own story, letting him repeat it, expand it, trip over it. They introduce contradictions gently, then let them sit, watching how he reacts when confronted with his own words from years ago. His tone shifts, irritation bleeding into defensiveness, defensiveness into something sharper, more brittle. They show him the object recovered from the dunes again, this time with context, this time with evidence that places it closer to the body than previously acknowledged. He insists it means nothing, that it proves nothing, but his hands tremble just enough to notice, a physical betrayal of the composure he's trying to project. He asks how they could possibly know it's connected to him, and in that question is the first real crack, the acknowledgement that connection is even a possibility. Hours pass. Breaks are taken. Water is offered. Silence does its work. When the detectives return, they introduce something new, not evidence but human presence, a photograph of the victim, not from the crime scene but from her life, smiling, alive, framed by the beach she loved. The shift is immediate. His eyes flick away, jaw tightening, as if the image carries a weight he can't bear to look at directly. They talk about her, not about him, about who she was, about the choices she made to come to Florida, about how her family has waited for answers. It's a calculated move, one that bypasses legal defenses and goes straight for whatever remains of conscience, if anything does. For a moment, the suspect seems smaller, less certain, and the room holds its breath. Then the phone rings again. The call comes to a separate line, routed through the tip system, flagged instantly by its tone and brevity. The anonymous caller is back, and this time there's urgency, frustration edging into the voice. They reference the arrest before it's been made public, reference details from the interrogation that haven't left the room, and in doing so, confirm what investigators have suspected for days, that someone has been watching this case from the inside of the suspect's life. Close enough to feel the walls closing in. The caller doesn't confess. They don't name themselves. They say only that the truth won't come out the way investigators expect, that the suspect will never say what happened, and that if they want to understand the night on the beach, they need to look at what happened afterward, not before. Then the line goes dead again, leaving behind more questions than answers and a sense that time is running out. Back in the interrogation room, the suspect grows increasingly agitated, sensing something he can't quite see, an unseen pressure altering the dynamic. He asks if someone has talked, if someone has blamed him, if there's more coming. The detectives deflect, hold steady, but the shift has already occurred. He knows he's no longer in control of the narrative, that someone else holds pieces of the story he thought were buried forever. As night falls, prosecutors make the call to hold him without bail pending further review, citing the seriousness of the charge and the risk of flight. The news spreads quickly, media vans lining the street by morning, headlines flashing phrases like cold case arrest, beach murder suspect in custody, but inside the department, no one celebrates yet. An arrest is not an ending, it's a test, and cold cases have a way of failing people at the last possible moment. The detectives review the anonymous call again, parse every word, every pause, every inflection, and the message becomes clearer the more they listen. This isn't someone trying to protect the suspect, it's someone trying to protect themselves, someone whose involvement didn't end on the beach, someone who knows that if the story is told in full, their own actions will be dragged into the light. The realization settles like a second weight on the case. The murder may not have been a solitary act, and the truth may be uglier than anyone wants to admit. Somewhere between the beach and the days that followed, something else happened, something that tied more than one person to the crime, and as the suspect sits alone in a holding cell, staring at the wall, the detectives understand that the cold case isn't just cracking open, it's splitting. Revealing layers that were never meant to be seen. The idea that the crime didn't end on the beach changes everything, tilts the investigation onto unfamiliar ground where motive and aftermath blur together, and the detectives feel the weight of a second timeline opening beneath the first. They return to the days following the murder, not as epilogue but as a continuation, asking who knew, who saw, who helped, and what was done to make a killing disappear into routine life without leaving a visible scar. They comb through old communications again, not just the suspects, but those of people orbiting him at the time, friends, partners, acquaintances whose names barely registered years ago. Phone records reveal clusters of calls made in the early hours after the estimated time of death, short, repeated, frantic, numbers that light up together and then go silent, a pattern that looks less like coincidence and more like coordination. Each call becomes a door, and behind each door is a version of the night that was never documented. One number stands out, not because of volume but because of timing, a call placed just after sunrise, minutes after the body would have been discovered but before news broke publicly. That detail sends a ripple through the team, because it suggests foreknowledge, the kind that only comes from proximity or involvement. They track the number to a woman who once shared a home with the suspect, a relationship that ended abruptly not long after the murder, the separation explained at the time as mutual, amicable, forgettable. When detectives contact her, she doesn't hang up. She doesn't deny knowing why they're calling. She sounds tired, older than her years, and asks only one question before agreeing to meet, asking if this is finally happening, if the waiting is finally over. In the interview room, she sits rigidly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the table, and when she speaks, her words come out measured, controlled, as if she has practiced them alone for years. She describes the night after the murder, not the beach, not the act itself, but the knock on the door in the early hours, the suspect standing there with sand on his shoes and panic in his eyes, saying only that something terrible had happened. She says she didn't ask questions at first, didn't want to know, didn't want to become someone who knew, but knowledge has a way of forcing itself on people, especially when fear is involved. She talks about helping him clean his car, about throwing away items she never touched again, about lying to police without fully understanding the consequences at the time, telling herself she was protecting someone she loved, telling herself it wasn't her crime. As she speaks, the room fills with a different kind of tension, the sound of a secret finally exhausting itself after years of being held too tightly. Detectives listen without interruption, letting the confession unfold naturally, because they know this moment is fragile, that pushing too hard could shatter it. She admits she never went to the beach, never saw the victim, but confirms what the anonymous caller hinted at, that the aftermath was deliberate, that evidence was handled, stories aligned, silence enforced not through threats but through shared fear and mutual destruction. When asked why she didn't come forward sooner, her answer is simple and devastating. She says she thought time would bury it, that the ocean would do its work, that the case would fade into history and everyone involved could pretend it never happened. She says the anonymous calls were her, that watching the investigation stir after so many years made the guilt unbearable, that hearing the victim's name again felt like a sentence being read aloud. The admission reframes everything. The anonymous tipster wasn't an outsider or a hero, but a participant seeking absolution without exposure, someone trying to control the damage while easing their own conscience. The detectives document every word, aware that this testimony doesn't just strengthen the case, it complicates it, dragging another life into the gravity of the crime. Prosecutors move quickly now, recalibrating strategy, preparing additional charges, negotiating cooperation in exchange for reduced consequences. The woman signs statements, hands over what little physical evidence remains, directs investigators to places where items were discarded years ago, locations long altered by development and time, but still worth searching because truth, even delayed, has a way of leaving traces. The suspect is informed that someone has talked, not told who, not shown details, just enough to unsettle him. The effect is immediate. His posture changes, shoulders slumping, the defiance draining out of his voice. He asks if there's any point in continuing, asks what happens next, asks questions that sound less like strategy and more like surrender, and for the first time, the detective sees something close to fear, not of prison, but of being fully known. He doesn't confess. Not yet. He circles the truth, acknowledges mistakes, admits to being on the beach, to arguing, to losing control of a moment without describing its outcome. He frames it as chaos, as accident, as something that spiraled beyond intention, and even in partial admission, the shape of the crime becomes clearer, more human, more terrifying in its ordinariness. Outside, the story finally breaks. Headlines shift from cold case cracked to accomplice revealed, anonymous tipper identified, community stunned again by the realization that the truth was never far away, just hidden behind ordinary faces and everyday routines. The beach remains crowded, sunlit, unchanged, but now it carries a second memory, not just of a murder, but of how easily people can live beside a secret for years without being seen. As night settles once more over the Florida coast, detectives close files they never thought they would, knowing the case isn't finished yet, knowing trials lie ahead, knowing justice will be slow and imperfect, but also knowing that the silence that protected the crime has finally been broken. And somewhere in that quiet, between the sound of waves and the weight of confession, the cold case takes on a new shape, no longer frozen, no longer untouchable, but scarred, exposed, and moving inevitably toward its end. The confession doesn't bring relief the way people imagine it should. It doesn't feel like a door opening, it feels like a room filling with smoke, visibility improving only enough to reveal how much damage was done inside. Detectives replay the woman's statement again and again, aligning it with evidence, timestamps, gaps that once felt abstract now snapping into place with a clarity that's almost brutal. The case stops being a mystery and starts becoming a responsibility. They return to the suspect with a different posture, not confrontational, not pleading, just factual. They lay out what they know about the aftermath, about the car, about the cleaning, about the lies that followed, and they do it without theatrics, because they no longer need to push. The truth has momentum now, and resistance only delays the inevitable. He listens, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the table, absorbing the reality that the story he controlled for years no longer belongs to him. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter, stripped of its earlier edge. He admits more, not everything, but enough to redraw the night with sharper lines. He talks about leaving the bar together, about the argument that started small and escalated quickly, fueled by alcohol, jealousy, words said too fast to take back. He describes the drive to the beach not as a plan but as an impulse, a place he thought would calm things down, a neutral ground that turned lethal in the dark. He says the fight moved toward the dunes, away from the lights, away from witnesses, and that's where control slipped completely. He doesn't describe the final moments in detail, avoiding specifics, retreating into vague language, but the absence speaks loudly enough. He admits he knew she was dead before he left, knew there was no fixing it, and in that admission the room feels colder, heavier, as if the years themselves have finally caught up. The legal process accelerates. Charges are amended, accomplice liability formalized, plea negotiations discussed in closed rooms where words like intent and negligence carry enormous weight. Prosecutors build their case not just around what happened on the beach, but around what followed, the deliberate choices made in the hours and days after, the decision to clean, to lie, to let a family grieve without answers. In cold cases, justice often arrives in fragments, and this one is no different. The woman who came forward is placed under protective conditions, her cooperation documented, her credibility tested, because confession doesn't erase responsibility, it only reframes it. She answers questions about her state of mind at the time, about fear, about love curdled into obligation, about how quickly loyalty can become complicity when the alternative feels like annihilation. Her story is uncomfortable because it doesn't offer a villain alone, it offers a mirror. The victim's family is briefed again, this time with more certainty and more pain. They hear details they never asked for, learn about arguments and betrayals that shatter whatever innocence they still carried about her final night. There is relief in knowing, but it's tangled with anger, with the knowledge that the truth was delayed not by chance, but by human choice. Years stolen not by the tide, but by silence. As the case moves toward court, the community reacts in waves. Some people express outrage that it took so long. Others express disbelief that someone they knew, someone ordinary, could be connected to something so violent. The beach becomes a symbol again, a backdrop for news trucks and interviews, a place where reporters stand with microphones while families walk past, trying not to look at the spot everyone keeps pointing to. The suspect's defense team begins its work, shaping a narrative of diminished intent, of chaos, of a night that spiraled beyond control. They emphasize cooperation, partial admissions, the absence of a clear weapon, hoping to soften edges, hoping to turn murder into something less absolute. Prosecutors counter with the weight of concealment, with the argument that what someone does after a crime reveals as much as what they did during it. In quiet moments, detectives feel the strange emptiness that follows resolution, the absence of a question that once consumed them. They look at the beach differently now, no longer as a riddle, but as a place where the truth finally surfaced after years of being held down. They know the trial will reopen wounds, that verdicts rarely satisfy everyone, but they also know that the case has moved out of the dark, and that matters. The suspect is transferred to a long-term holding facility, escorted past cameras that flash and shout questions he doesn't answer. His face appears on screens across the state, older, worn, stripped of anonymity at last. For the first time since that night, he can't walk away, can't sell a car, can't change a routine to escape what he did. The story has caught up to him. And still, even now, the beach remains unchanged, waves breaking in the same rhythm they always have, indifferent to human drama. But for those who know the full story, every stretch of sand carries an echo, not just of violence, but of the years it took for fear, guilt, and silence to finally lose their grip. The cold case, once frozen in uncertainty, now moves forward under the weight of truth, toward a reckoning that can't undo the past, but can finally name it. The courtroom becomes the new shoreline, a controlled space where tides are measured in objections and rulings, where nothing is allowed to wash away without being examined first. The case that once lived in whispers now speaks out loud, sentence by sentence, under fluorescent lights that strip away romance and leave only fact. Jurors file in carrying their own assumptions, their own distance from the beach, unaware that they're about to inherit years of silence and be asked to weigh it. Opening statements avoid spectacle, because the story is strong enough on its own. Prosecutors talk about choices, about moments when someone could have stopped and didn't, about how violence is rarely sudden but often the end of a line drawn too far. They don't dramatize the ocean or the sand, they don't need to. They focus on sequence, on what happened, and on what followed, because aftermath is where intent leaves fingerprints. The defense counters with restraint, emphasizing uncertainty, emphasizing time, reminding the jury how memories decay and evidence erodes. They speak about alcohol, about arguments that escalate, about how a single night shouldn't define an entire life. It's a careful construction, designed to introduce doubt without denying everything, to create space where the worst version of events feels just slightly less inevitable. Witnesses take the stand one by one, each adding weight in a different way. Detectives explain the early missteps, the limits of technology at the time, the reason the case went cold without sounding defensive. The bartender describes the argument outside the bar, her voice steady but her hands trembling, because even remembered fragments can carry guilt. Analysts walk the jury through phone records, through gaps and pings, translating invisible data into movement, into presence, into proximity. Then the woman who came forward steps into the light. The room tightens. She swears to tell the truth and begins with the knock on the door, the fear, the cleaning, the lies. She doesn't embellish. She doesn't cry. She speaks like someone who has already rehearsed every version of this moment alone in the dark. The defense presses her hard, questions her motives, suggests self-preservation, suggests revenge, suggests she's shaping her story to save herself. She doesn't argue. She just repeats what happened, again and again, until repetition itself becomes proof. When the suspect takes the stand, the air changes again. He speaks carefully, choosing words as if they might still protect him. He admits to the argument, admits to being on the beach, admits to panic, but stops short of the final act, describing it as a blur, as something he wishes he could erase. Prosecutors don't push for drama. They ask about decisions. They ask about leaving. They ask about cleaning. They ask about years of silence. And slowly, the narrative tightens around him, not as a monster, but as a man who made a series of irreversible choices. The jury watches everything, not just what's said, but how it's said, the pauses, the glances, the moments when eyes drop to the table instead of meeting another human being's gaze. Trials aren't about truth alone, they're about credibility, about whose version of events feels anchored to reality rather than drifting away from it. Outside the courthouse, cameras wait, commentators speculate, the phrase cold case solved repeats until it loses shape, until it feels inadequate for what's unfolding inside. The victim's family sits together, hands linked, absorbing details they never wanted, balancing relief against grief that has learned to live with unanswered questions. Justice, when it arrives late, carries a different weight, heavier and harder to lift. Closing arguments bring the story full circle, back to the beach without ever showing it. Prosecutors remind the jury that no one else was there, that silence was maintained by design, that truth didn't surface by accident but by the failure of guilt to stay buried forever. The defense asks for mercy without using the word, asks the jury to consider doubt as a moral act, to remember that certainty is rare, especially when years intervene. Deliberations stretch on, hours folding into each other while the courtroom empties and refills with tension. Every creak of the door feels loaded. Every whisper sounds like a verdict rehearsed too early. When the jury finally returns, the room stands as one, breath held, history balanced on a single moment. The verdict is read slowly, count stacking one on top of another, and with each word, something settles. It isn't triumph. It isn't joy. It's acknowledgement. A naming of what happened, stripped of euphemism. The suspect absorbs it without reaction, as if he has already lived with this ending in private for years. The woman who helped conceal the aftermath hears her own fate outlined in careful legal language, consequences measured but unavoidable. Sentencing is set for a later date, but the story doesn't pause for ceremony. Outside, the beach waits, unchanged, still catching the same light it always has. People walk it without knowing the weight it carries, without hearing the echo of a verdict carried inland by the wind. The case, once frozen, now moves toward its final chapter, not as closure, but as record, a line drawn through time to mark where silence finally failed. And as night falls again over Florida, the ocean keeps its rhythm, indifferent but no longer complicit, its secret spoken aloud at last, leaving behind not peace, but something closer to truth, sharp-edged and permanent, etched into the memory of everyone who listened long enough to hear it. Sentencing doesn't arrive with suspense, it arrives with gravity, the slow accumulation of everything that has already been said, every word weighed again in a quieter room where the noise of speculation has finally been shut out. The judge listens, expression unreadable, as attorneys speak not to convince but to contextualize, to frame the damage in terms the law can hold without cracking under it. The victim's family speaks first. They don't dramatize the night. They don't need to. They talk about absence, about holidays that never sound the same, about the way time keeps moving while grief stays put. Each sentence lands softly but firmly, not as accusation, but as record, ensuring that the woman who died on that beach is present in the room one last time is more than evidence. The woman who helped cover up the crime speaks too. Her voice shakes now, not from fear of punishment, but from the finality of confession becoming public memory. She talks about fear, about loving the wrong person, about the lie that silence is safer than truth. The judge listens, nods once, and reminds her that understanding a motive does not erase responsibility. Accountability, when delayed, still arrives. The suspect is given the chance to speak. He stands slowly, hands clasped, eyes scanning the room without settling on anyone for long. He offers an apology shaped carefully enough to survive legal scrutiny, expresses regret without naming the full horror of what he did, and in that restraint, the distance remains. It is not remorse that fills the room, but inevitability, the recognition that this story has already chosen its ending. The sentence is delivered with precision. Years spelled out clearly, consecutively, leaving little room for interpretation. It is not the maximum, not the minimum, but something in between, calibrated to reflect both the act and the years of concealment that followed. When the words land, no one reacts immediately. There is no gasp, no outburst, only the quiet acceptance of something that cannot be appealed away. Outside the courthouse, microphones wait, but the family walks past them, faces forward, unwilling to turn their private loss into public sound bites. The headlines form anyway: cold case sentencing, justice after decades, beach murder finally resolved, phrases that simplify what cannot be simplified, that compress years of fear, guilt, and waiting into a few lines of text. Life resumes in fragments. Detectives return to other cases, other files, but this one lingers, not as a mystery anymore, but as a lesson in how easily truth can be delayed and how difficult it is to retrieve once it slips beneath the surface. They talk about it less and less, until one day they realize they haven't talked about it at all, and that silence feels different now, earned rather than imposed. The beach sees no ceremony, no marker, no plaque. It remains what it has always been to most people, a place to walk, to swim, to forget. But for those who know the full story, it has acquired a second identity, a reminder that violence doesn't require darkness to persist, only inattention, only the willingness of others to look away. Years later, the case is taught quietly in training rooms, not as a triumph, but as a cautionary tale. Instructors point out where assumptions replaced verification, where early clearance became permanent blindness, where fear masqueraded as loyalty. The anonymous tips are discussed, not as miracles, but as evidence that guilt does not age well, that it leaks through even the strongest barriers. The victim's name appears in fewer articles now, the internet's memory already shifting to newer tragedies, newer crimes. But in the minds of those who followed the case from beginning to end, her story has hardened into something durable, a reminder that resolution does not heal, it only stops the bleeding. As time moves forward again, unmarked by anniversaries or press conferences, the ocean continues its work, erasing footprints, smoothing sand, pretending nothing ever happened. But the truth no longer depends on the beach to be remembered. It lives in records, in testimony, in the quiet understanding that some cold cases don't just reveal who committed the crime, they reveal how many people carried it, and how long a community can live beside a secret before it finally demands to be named. And even now, long after the verdict and the sentence, the story refuses to fully rest, lingering in the background of the town's identity, a low, steady hum beneath everyday life, reminding anyone willing to listen that justice delayed is still justice shaped by loss, and that some echoes, once released, never completely fade. Time stretches after sentencing in a way it never did before, no longer measured by court dates or investigative milestones, but by the slow recalibration of lives that were bent around an unanswered question for years. The case slips out of the headlines, replaced by fresher outrage, newer crimes, but for those closest to it, the silence that follows is not empty, it's heavy, filled with everything that was postponed while the truth stayed hidden. The victim's family returns home without cameras, without statements, carrying a verdict that feels both definitive and incomplete. They pack away documents they once studied obsessively, transcripts marked with notes, photographs they never wanted but needed to see. Knowing what happened does not soften the loss, it reorganizes it, forcing grief to adjust to a reality where imagination no longer fills the gaps. The unknown is gone, replaced by something solid and painful. They visit the beach once, quietly, early in the morning when the sand is still cool and the air carries that familiar mix of salt and wind. There is no ceremony, no flowers laid with intention for strangers to photograph, just a moment of standing where the water meets land, letting the waves erase footprints almost as soon as they're made. It isn't forgiveness. It isn't closure. It's acknowledgement, a private agreement between memory and place. Inside the system, the case becomes a reference point. Detectives speak about it in careful terms, about the danger of assumptions, about how easily early conclusions harden into permanent truth. They talk about the anonymous calls, about how information delivered without context can still alter the course of justice, about the thin line between conscience and self-preservation. New investigators listen, taking notes, unaware that one day they will carry their own version of this weight. The woman who came forward begins serving her sentence under terms that reflect cooperation but not absolution. Letters arrive from people she hasn't heard from in years, some offering forgiveness, others condemnation. She reads them all, because she believes she deserves to feel every version of what she delayed. Her name becomes associated with the case in quiet corners of the internet, a footnote in a tragedy she helped prolong. The suspect settles into incarceration, the rhythm of days replacing the chaos of the trial. Appeals are discussed and dismissed, not because they lack merit, but because the narrative is too complete now to be dismantled easily. His story exists in transcripts, in sworn testimony, in details that no longer belong to him. Control, the thing he preserved for so long through silence, is gone. The town adjusts without realizing it. Conversations about safety shift slightly. Parents linger a little longer when their children walk the beach at night. Bars close with a new awareness of how quickly ordinary nights can turn. Nothing dramatic changes, but something subtle does, a shared understanding that familiarity does not equal immunity. Journalists revisit the story months later, writing long-form pieces that examine not just the crime, but the delay, the human decisions that allowed it to remain unsolved. They interview former detectives, legal experts, psychologists, all searching for meaning in a timeline that feels too long to justify. The phrase cold case cracked appears again, but now it carries nuance, an acknowledgement that cracking something open can reveal more damage than expected. In private moments, those who worked the case think about the anonymous calls, about how close the truth always was, about how fear can masquerade as loyalty for years before finally collapsing under its own weight. They wonder how many other cases are waiting for a similar fracture, how many secrets are being carried by people who haven't yet decided whether they can live with them. The beach remains unchanged to outsiders, its surface constantly renewed, its past invisible to anyone who isn't looking for it. But for the people tied to this story, it has become a measure, a reminder of how long the truth can be submerged before it demands air. Every wave feels like repetition, every horizon like a boundary that can't be crossed back into ignorance. As seasons turn and attention fades, the case settles into its final form, no longer active, no longer unresolved, but not truly finished either. It exists as a record, a warning, a testament to the cost of silence and the persistence of memory. And in that space between resolution and peace, the story holds, refusing to dissolve completely, insisting on being remembered not for its shock, but for the long, quiet damage it left behind. In the end, what remains is not the verdict, not the sentence, not even the headlines that once promised shock and resolution, but the quiet residue left behind when a story finally stops moving. The case settles into archives and databases, its file number cited, its facts frozen, yet the human imprint refuses to flatten into ink and paper. For those who lived inside it, the cold case never truly closes, it just stops asking questions out loud. The beach keeps no record. It never did. Wind drags new patterns across the sand every night, tides redraw the shoreline without regard for memory, and anyone standing there now would see nothing that hints at what unfolded years earlier. That indifference is what unsettles people the most, not that violence happened here, but that the place itself absorbed it without resistance, held it without testimony, and then carried on. The victim's name surfaces less often now, spoken mostly in quiet rooms, among people who knew her before she became a case. Her life is no longer defined by how it ended, but by fragments reclaimed from before the night on the beach, stories retold deliberately, stubbornly, as if repetition can protect them from being overwritten by the crime. In those retellings, she laughs again, plans again, exists beyond evidence. The investigators move forward, but the case shadows them. It appears in decisions they make on other files, in moments when a lead feels too easy, when an alibi feels too clean. They remember how certainty once slowed this case down, how confidence became complacency, and they hesitate just long enough now to ask one more question, to look twice at something that doesn't quite fit. The woman who broke the silence learns that confession is not an ending, but a permanent state. Her cooperation shortened a sentence, not the memory. She lives with the knowledge that she spoke too late to prevent harm, only early enough to stop it from remaining invisible forever. Some nights, that distinction feels meaningful. Other nights, it feels hollow. The man who carried the crime the longest now exists in a place where time is rigid and unavoidable, where days don't blur into anonymity. He is known for what he did, not for who he pretended to be afterward. The story no longer belongs to him to shape or soften. It exists independent of his explanations, fixed in a version that does not require his agreement. In the community, the case fades into a reference point, a sentence people begin with, "Remember when," a marker in local memory that signals something darker beneath familiar streets and familiar faces. It becomes part of the town's vocabulary, a reminder that safety is often assumed until it's interrupted, and that interruption can echo for years. Occasionally, someone new asks about it, a visitor, a journalist, a student studying cold cases, and the story is told again, condensed, streamlined, stripped of its emotional drag. Florida beach murder, unsolved for years, anonymous tip leads to arrest. It sounds neat that way. Manageable. But those who know the full arc understand how misleading that neatness is, how much uncertainty and fear lived inside those missing years. The ocean continues to erase what it touches. That is its nature. But the truth no longer depends on the shoreline to exist. It has been spoken, recorded, acknowledged, and in that acknowledgement, something irreversible occurred. The case crossed a boundary from rumor to record, from suspicion to fact, and that crossing cannot be undone. There is no final image, no last shot that ties everything together. The story doesn't end with justice standing tall against the horizon. It ends the way most real stories do, unevenly, quietly, with people learning how to live around what cannot be fixed. Closure, if it exists at all, is private and incomplete. And somewhere between the sound of waves and the weight of memory, the case finds its final form. Not as a mystery anymore, not as a headline, but as a reminder. A reminder that silence can stretch for years without breaking, that truth often arrives late and jagged, and that some cold cases don't haunt us because they remain unsolved, but because they reveal how long the answers were there, waiting, while everyone looked the other way. The beach goes dark again as night falls, indistinguishable from any other night, and the ocean keeps moving, carrying nothing, confessing nothing, while the story it once held stays behind, fixed not in sand or water, but in the minds of those who finally listened long enough to hear it. Even after the last document is filed, even after the courtroom empties and the cameras drift elsewhere, the case continues to breathe in places no one monitors. It lives in the pauses between conversations, in the way people hesitate before answering questions about the past, in the subtle recalibration of trust that never quite returns to its original setting. A cold case doesn't disappear when it's cracked, it changes temperature, moving from frozen uncertainty to something warmer, heavier, harder to ignore. Years later, the evidence still sits in storage, sealed in boxes labeled with dates that feel unreal now. Plastic bags clouded with age. Fibers catalogued and forgotten again. Objects that once screamed urgency now rest in silence, their job finished, their meaning extracted. But for those who touched them first, gloves on, breath held, the sensation never fully fades. They remember how the air felt when those bags were opened, how the room seemed to shrink around a single truth taking shape. The anonymous tip that shattered the stalemate becomes legend, retold with different inflections, different theories layered on top of it. Some insist it was guilt. Others say fear. A few believe it was inevitability, the sense that secrets rot faster the longer they're buried. The truth of that moment belongs to one person alone, and even now, it remains partially obscured, another shadow folded into the larger story. In quiet moments, detectives revisit the timeline in their heads, not to question the outcome, but to understand the delay. They trace each missed connection, each assumption that felt reasonable at the time. They ask themselves how many other cases are waiting for the same fracture, the same unexpected voice to cut through the noise. The lesson is uncomfortable but necessary. Answers don't always come from brilliance or technology, sometimes they arrive because someone finally decides they can't carry the weight anymore. The victim's family learns how to live with a truth that arrived late and incomplete. Justice answered some questions and created others that will never be addressed in any official setting. Why this night? Why this place? Why no one intervened sooner? They stop asking those questions out loud, not because they've been satisfied, but because asking doesn't change the shape of the loss. What does change is the silence. It no longer presses in from all sides. The town absorbs the case into its identity, not proudly, not willingly, but permanently. New businesses open where old ones closed. Streets are repaved. The beach hosts weddings, vacations, laughter that has no awareness of what once unfolded there. And still, for those who know, there's a faint dissonance, a recognition that beauty and brutality can occupy the same coordinates without ever acknowledging each other. Late at night, when the shoreline is empty and the water reflects nothing but moonlight, the past feels closer. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just present. As if memory itself moves with the tide, advancing and retreating, never fully gone. The sound of waves becomes less comforting then, more like a metronome marking time that cannot be recovered. The case taught the public something they didn't want to learn, that monsters don't always look like strangers, that danger can wear familiarity convincingly, and that the line between ordinary and unthinkable is thinner than anyone likes to admit. That knowledge lingers, reshaping how people lock doors, how they assess situations, how quickly they trust the stories they're told. And still, life continues. It has to. Cold cases don't end communities, they scar them, quietly, in ways that only become visible under pressure. The scar remains sensitive, reactive to reminders, but no longer open. It's a mark of survival as much as damage. Somewhere in the records, the case is listed as resolved. Solved. Cracked. Words chosen for efficiency, not accuracy. Because resolution implies symmetry, and nothing about this story was balanced. It was asymmetrical from the start, tilted by chance, delayed by silence, corrected by accident rather than design. What remains is the knowledge that truth can sleep for years without dying, that it can be buried beneath routine and denial and still surface when least expected. That is the legacy of this Florida beach murder cold case, not just that it was finally unraveled, but that it proved how fragile certainty really is. The ocean keeps moving, indifferent as ever, but the people do not. They carry the story forward, altered by it, quieter about it, aware now that some answers come only after patience runs out and someone, somewhere, decides that the cost of silence has finally become too high to pay.